right. Welcome back to Jealous Podcast. Rodney. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Off the rails. Talk about off the rails. That conversation we were just having before. Hopefully that does not get edited in because this podcast would come to an abrupt stop and the authorities may be called. But we'll avoid that. We had a great episode. We had a great guest today, Andy Scott. Tell us a little bit about it. Why did you bring him on?
Just because I've known him forever. And to me now, at the end of college, I don't remember much during college anymore.
Nice.
Because I got it all out of my system back then, I thought. But anyway, when I got my first professional job at the Iowa City Press-Citizen, we had to always had a part-timer, and we always took from the pool of photographers we'd see at the Daily Iowan or just in town. But it always came from the Daily Iowan. And Andy was one of the first people I hired. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden there's I had like 4 in a row. And like if you knew these people, you just go,
they're amazing.
They were amazing, and I think it had to do with there was an instructor there at the time who was big into documentary photography, and he just kind of lit the fire under him, and they all are kind of like world beaters now,
very
literally.
Cool. He's definitely a badass. He's married to a badass.
Yeah.
I don't think they get, and I brought this up several times, but I don't think there's any sleeping in that household. They're just busy, dedicated professionals. So, yeah, I'm definitely, I would say I'm jealous of him.
Yeah,
I had so many questions I didn't get to ask. I wanted to know, just so many things. Social media, how everything's changed the game, technology. Yeah. But he answered a lot of our questions, and he was a really great guest, very kind. You can tell he still has, he's in Virginia, but he's got that Midwest
sensibility about him.
Yeah. Sensibility
no, he's always just, like I said, when he got to the USA Today position, and then all of a sudden it was just like, hey, I can call him, and he's an influencer. You could call him, and I was like, hey, when is this going to happen? When's this? Can we get this? And
can he tell you those things? He probably can't tell you.
Well, some of them. I have, a couple of friends at other papers too.
Oh wow!
Who've moved on.
So when I want to know things, I just need to come to you and beg you to ask them for me.
2 phone calls. That's the old days.
2 phone calls.
Now it's like 1 click. You can find anything. But it used to be 2 phone calls. You could find out what you needed to know. Either find a freelancer, find equipment. Because it was back in the day. Your Rolodex. Everybody had 2 or 3 Rolodexes. You're full of stuff and. I just saw a TikTok about that where you guys showed like you're from the 90s. You're from the 90s if you had this, and it was the old brown one where you slid it down to B and then you popped it up. Yeah, one of those.
Oh my gosh!
We had like 5 of them there in the newsroom.
That's a recovered memory.
We knew everybody.
Are you the one that drove around with them in their trunk? Was that you? No, that was someone else.
In their trunk.
Yeah, all their Rolodex. Maybe that was.
But there were some reporters who would keep their old notebooks and things like that.
Do you keep? I keep all my. We're moving out of our house, and I finally threw away a bunch of old notebooks the other day, and I don't know why I was keeping them. There were no brilliant ideas in those notebooks, but
I got rolls of film from when I was in high school, or actually junior high is when I started developing film. So I still got these rolled up. I got prints from back then and stuff, and
develop them yourself in the bathroom.
It was in the basement actually. We had a shower with the old concrete funnel.
Yeah.
It wasn't flat, so you kind of fell into this funnel. But you pour the chemistry in, we probably killed all the wildlife around our area with all the chemistry. But otherwise, no, Andy is, gosh darn it, I swear he rocketed right up. He went from the Press-Citizen to working at the Dallas Morning News with, like you said, one of the largest staffs, Pulitzer Prize winning photographers here and there, and he was working with transmitters and things before a lot of us were. Whatever the tool was needed for the job, and like you said, you innovate or die, I guess is what it comes down to.
Exactly, innovate or die. I love that, and I love a good success story of a good old Iowa boy. That's good. So you guys enjoy. If you have any questions for us, just DM. Shelby's on the DMs per usual. And we'll get them answered. But thank you for joining and enjoy the episode.
Enjoy.
Bye. Enjoy. Bye. Andy, welcome. Welcome to Jealous Podcast. We have heard a lot of things about you, like a lot of secret things I'm not sure that we could share. Right, Rodney?
Yeah, over a beer, but not in this format.
Not in this format. And I told you no beer, so I think we're safe. Your secrets are going to be safe with us. Rodney right here, he's definitely jealous of you, and I know that he has his reasons. But before we get into why that is, I would love for you to just introduce yourself in your own words. I know that you're the director of photo and video news gathering at USA Today, but who are you? Who are you actually?
So yeah, that's my title. Thanks for having me. Rodney and I go way back to when I was in college. Rodney actually hired me for my first real job at the Iowa City Press Citizen when I was at the University of Iowa. But I grew up in Ames and lived there for 18 years and went to Iowa and have been had 10-year stop in Texas and then have been at USA Today for the past 15 years.
Wow. So the hardest thing you had to do in any of that was move from Ames to Iowa City, I'm sure.
No, actually that was actually a good move. It was, my dad is a psych prof or was a psych prof at Iowa State for 45 years. And, you grew up in a college town, you kind of feel like you know everybody. So it was great to go to Iowa. Great to go to Iowa City.
Oh, good. Well, good.
They're both great towns.
They are. I agree. We agree. So, Rodney, why? Why are you so jealous of this guy?
Well, so I wouldn't put it that strongly, but yes, I am. I just professionally.
There's a reason you're here.
I mean,
There's a reason he's here.
He's kind of right there at the cusp. And he's in charge of a very talented, experienced staff. He gets to go around the world, like setting up. I mean, he's in charge. He's the one. The buck stops with you, basically, when it comes to when something doesn't work. That's his job, but he also gets to shoot. And it's just like, yeah, I do like that. That I don't know if I went that way myself, but I totally see it. I mean, yeah, I think I just did the day-to-day work, and then I kind of just said, yeah, I'm done with the day-to-day newspaper work. But I mean, you and your wife have done so many things that it's I think it's just where you're working. I think I always like seeing people come, and again, it's that small town mentality of like, yeah, I grew up in Pleasantville and, moved up and at least worked for a metro paper, but he moved on to work for the Nation's paper, I guess. What is the tagline now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always been the tagline that, the USA Today, the Nation's newspaper, because that was, we're coming up on 40 years of USA Today.
Wow.
And that was one of sort of the early inspirations of it, is that it was the, intended to be the newspaper of America, and not like, the New York Times, which is an East Coast paper, which happens to be big, or the Washington Post, which is a Washington paper, which happens to be big, but, it was really, centered around the idea that it's news from around the whole U.S. So.
Yeah, when I was working at the Press Citizen, or even the Daily Iowan, they always had an April 1st edition. They call it the Daily Rooster. And they would show like a weather report that was like 2 lines long, like it's cloudy and a chance of rain in western Iowa. And then it would have like 20 people listed as this report based on reports from blah, blah, blah. And then it was like, the tagline was, if it happens, it's news to us. The newspaper that depends upon Iowa for news.
That's just kind of Iowa. That's
like
perfectly put then.
Yeah.
That's funny.
But yeah, no, we... Iowa City. I think the reason I went to Iowa City was because of the Daily Iowan. It was really, I thought they had more of a journalism department at the time, and I think when I was going through there, it was like they were almost lost their accreditation. Almost, there was a couple of years where it was a little iffy, but the paper had always been a great breeding ground for a lot of great journalists that have come through there in visual and reporting. And I was just lucky enough to get a job at the Press Citizen, and then we always needed, photographers would come and go. I think we had 2 full-time and a part-time position. So there was like a 5-year span. I mean, I count Andy among that. You had Andy come through and then go on to do this job. And then David Gutenfelder, who's like a geographic fellow and won every award except for the Pulitzer. He's the Susan Lucci of the Pulitzer.
I actually get that reference.
Yeah,
so
he's like seven times. And then Andy Frazier, who's basically a world-beating photographer, who's in the upper echelon of photojournalism, which means only 10 people have probably heard of him, but he's done some great work. And then there's probably been people since then, but I just remember, and John Lowenstein, too. I can't forget him, and he's the one that's done great documentary work in Chicago. And it was just all in a row, and that's what I wanted to ask you is, like, what do you attribute to your success or just your happiness with the job? When you were at Iowa, was it the people you worked with, or was it the instructors, or a little bit of both?
Well, I think it was probably the people I worked with and the sort of the creative environment. I mean, I think, I probably went to Iowa for some of the underlying reasons you outlined, because like I started out in engineering. I was interested in engineering. Iowa State has a fabulous engineering school, but I was also very interested in photography and journalism, and the Daily Iowan was just this great place to be. And I was in my senior year in high school was freelancing for the Ames Tribune, and so like I sort of had that in my blood that I wanted to do photojournalism, and so like Iowa seemed like the natural choice. And then you get to the DI, and there's a lot of creative people there, and then it was probably a year or two into being there when I was still at the DI, met Danny, met Gutenfelder, met Lowenstein, and kind of the four of us were there at roughly the same time, and we would all challenge each other on our work. And it was probably much more so of the sort of the challenge from peers. And then we had you had people in town like Rodney and Scott Norris who challenged us, and like the DI was a really competitive environment. Like we felt like we were we would be competing with the Press Citizen and the Quad City Times and Cedar Rapids and the Des Moines Register, and you'd meet all those folks. And so it was a really great creative time to to be able to be challenged and grow, and then opportunities came from that. I mean, I was at the DI for 2 years, and you hired me at the Press Citizen, and learned some lessons there. So.
I love that. You said it was a creative time. What was kind of going on during that time? Do you remember some of the, your best work during that time before, or maybe at the DI or when you went over to the Press Citizen? I love putting us back in that time. Not that it was that long ago. It wasn't.
Yeah.
That was.
It was.
Yeah.
But no, it was, like there was, there's more news going on in Iowa than I think a lot of people realize. And so like, we had, the caucuses, and you have presidential candidates coming through, and, we had major flooding in '93, and, there was always lots of news to cover. And then sports, University of Iowa sports is that's a real driver of the community. Same thing with Ames at Iowa State. And so there was no shortage of things as a young, ambitious photographer to go out and cover, and stories to find. And there was again, I think it's probably not much different today. Like there's plenty of great stories to be found in those communities.
Yeah, when I grew up, when going through that, I always thought you got to get 3 or 4 internships, really good internships, or you'll never make it. And I feel like you guys really carved your own path when it came to that. You said you interned at Cleveland, I guess. Yeah, Cleveland Plain Dealer, I'm guessing. And I mean, there's all these papers that were just famous for their photo staffs and such. But I know, like, Gutenfelder is just like, I got to go to Rwanda. This has to be covered. And he spoke Swahili, and he was an anthropology major. And then within 6 months, he's getting work with AP and New York Times, and then just if you followed him. But anyway. But no, it's just, I think that a lot of people when I was there, like the photo editor got $600 a month. So it was almost like golden handcuffs. It's like, well, I don't need an internship. I can get $600 a month, and then $300 or $400 to be a staff photographer. And we had like 5 of them and stuff. But again, it was just that competition. You were always looking at what others were doing. And there's just, even back then we felt there weren't that many photographers, newspaper photographers. And so you kind of knew everybody. Just so you'd see their name in a clip contest. You'd see it in the MPPA magazine or something. So even today, you keep track of people I went to school with, like David Zelaznik. He was a guy. He was 30 before he started photography. He's in Peoria, and then it's just it was really creative. I don't know. That's it. I felt like it kept me in Iowa City longer, or at least at the Daily Iowan and in school longer than I should have been, because people were taking their scholarship. Because people would buy camera gear. You'd scrounge camera gear, and you'd get it from freelance stuff. And there was also UPI. I think the Daily Iowan was UPI still when I was there. So you'd get $30 for an assignment, $50, and then AP came along and was giving you $250 or $300 for an assignment, and you felt like you were making it.
Yeah, very cool. Jump to now. So you're at the USA Today. What And we went through your title, but what does that actually mean? Like, take us through a day in the life of you at work.
And just we're going to put up a photo of you at the Olympics, if that first photo.
Sure.
I think
so my day-to-day is I kind of oversee a team of both our photo editing team and then a team of photo and video journalists. And that's covering everything from kind of daily news. Like this past weekend, I had a team in D.C., a team in LA, a team in New York covering abortion protests around the country, and then coordinating that with the Gannett photographers, Gannett properties around the country. So a lot of it's logistics and managing that team. And then my team does a lot of longer form enterprise work. So like we'll do longer term stories, and a lot of that's driven around video storytelling now. So we work a lot on that. So it's like the range of kind of the news of the day, and also like the big issue pieces that we're doing as a longer story, and then a lot of planning around major events. So like Olympics, conventions, kind of big set pieces like that, and those take sometimes months to sometimes years to plan. Like Olympics are normally a 2 to 3 year plan ahead of the Olympics. So we work with that, and normally take a really big team at the to those Olympic games, and do the same thing for for Super Bowls and other major events around the country.
Okay, I even saw there was a photo of you at the Oscars, I believe. So you get a shoot, and you get to put the suit on. You all fly in, and do events like that. I think we have a photo.
Yep.
Yeah, there we go.
Nice.
The Oscars. That's our team. Like that was probably a month before COVID hit. So we normally have a pretty big team at the Oscars. That's obviously the culmination of award season. Like there's a lot of lesser award shows that build up to the Oscars, but we'll have photographer on the carpet. We have videographer and reporter on the carpet doing interviews, and we've got a photographer in the show. And some years we have a photographer backstage for reaction, and then that's sort of like the technology aspect. That's all wired into an editing center, sort of in the bowels of the arena, and then we're editing all those images in real time to send it out both to USA Today and to our clients.
Oh my gosh!
And it requires that we wear a tux even if we're not on the carpet. So
I love it. You always see the pictures, and you always get the picture, like you're getting the pictures real time, but it's cool to hear the story about how those pictures are actually being taken, delivered right to your phone.
Considering the logistics, just the amount of equipment, but we were talking earlier about the like inauguration, where you ran probably 5 miles worth of Ethernet to connect cameras.
Right.
And so what was that like to cover an inauguration?
So, I mean, inauguration is like a lot of other major events. There's a lot of prep, for the inauguration, it's a couple weeks, because we have windows when we can get in just due to the security. And for inauguration, they're building that whole stage on the west front of the Capitol. And so we have to sort of negotiate as all of the press members to negotiate when we can get access to that while it's under construction, so we can run all of our cabling, because there's a center tower, like that's where you get that center shot of whether you watch it on TV or you see it in stills, like that's where that center shot is photographers are 40, 50 feet in the air looking head on, and there's positions all around the Capitol that are all wired in, and again, that all goes back to editors that are watching that in real time. You talked about kind of the Oscars. I mean, the inauguration is very much, there's a lot of tradition around it, but we know what's going to happen at 12:01, the new president is sworn in, and like it's very prescribed, so we know what time things are going to happen. And other events are a lot more dynamic, where you may have a run of show, but things happen, and like the Oscars is a good example of that, is in how being tethered and connected to our photographers in real time is, you may remember a couple of years ago, the envelope gate, where they announced the wrong winner. So we were in the press room, and we're seeing the photos come in real time. Robert Deutsch, one of our photographers, was shooting the show, and you could see the photos coming in, and they're coming in on my screen before I even see the television feed in our room, which has a 7-second delay. So like you can see the images coming in, and so they come up, and they walk up and they do the announcement, and then they do the announcement on TV, and then you start seeing images come in where it seems like something's not right here. And so like normally you're editing in real time, and so we've got like our caption templates all queued up, because like let's say best picture, like it's one of 7 winners, and you've got your caption all ready to go, and you're ready to just cut and paste and hit send on that. And so we were 2 seconds away from hitting send on the photo to go, and we realized that something was happening. And then I was able to scroll back and see, we were able to look and actually read the print on the envelope, so you could tell that they were walked out with the wrong envelope in real time. And so then we were able to send that and be able to show, okay, like they not only announced the wrong winner, but they had the wrong envelope when they walked out. And so it's kind of one of those things that, like, news photography, photojournalism has changed a lot like that with major events. Like, back in the day, you'd have to wait for a film to get run back to you. You'd have to, wait for it to get processed to look at those photos. And like now we are quite literally tethered and seeing it in real time.
Oh, that's crazy. That's like photo forensics right there. And you being able to look and see the envelope and the...
Well, that's why we say like images today now have a half-life. Boom. It's just like, okay, and I know the agencies, basically it's seconds matter. Like who's going to use whose photo. Right. And the famous one back in the day was the one of at the White House press correspondents' dinner of Ronald Reagan. Like he said, well, since there's no photographers here, and he sticks his hands up and makes a moose thing, and but one guy got it with the AP. But so that would beg the slap then.
I was just going to bring up the slap.
This
Hanashiro, who got the best slap,
nailed it, right? I think he had one of the better versions of it.
Yep. No, he did. So that's like, there's a spot that we have in one of the loges in the theater, and there's only 3 photographers there. Normally it's like us and Reuters and the LA Times, or sometimes AFP. Sometimes LA Times and AFP switch positions. But so Bert had the whole sequence, and again, part of that is Bert's in LA, so like he covers entertainment as a regular part of, he's done it for 40 years, so like he knows all these LA players. And so, but part of it is also knowing how to read the show, about seeing, okay, like this is off script, and following Will Smith on stage, and he has the whole slap, and obviously that was it didn't really matter what else happened to the show up until that point. That overtook everything as the storyline for the day.
And then was that a situation where you were somebody editing back in Virginia, like live? Was he tethered in for that too?
We had, I wasn't at that show because I had a conflict, but like one of our editors was there editing that. And again, it was the same thing. It was, it's just like the envelope gate, like he was looking at it in real time and realized, okay, like Will Smith coming up on stage, slapping him was not part of the skit.
Yeah. That's what we
I don't think I could keep my cool. Like I would not keep my job. Like, you guys, look at this.
We used to say there was a point where, like, if you don't get the photo, make sure you get the photo. Like as an editor.
What's
so
that
if
mean?
one of your people didn't get the image, you find the person who did, and that's probably kind of partly your job, because you see. I mean, just because you're a USA Today photographer at the Olympics or at the Super Bowl, you're not guaranteed of getting your photos in the paper, right?
Right, exactly. Like, I mean, it's competitive, and there's certainly been times when, you're not in the right position, or, you just got beat by one of your competitors. And, some of our competitors are agencies that we subscribe to and pay a lot of money for service from, like AP and Getty and AFP. And yeah, I mean, that stings, but it's competitive, more often than not that we've got it. But it is, it's competitive, even in or especially at Olympics. when, there's a very finite number of photographers that are there, and there's a finite number of places that you can be.
Yeah. There was a thing about that. Gosh darn, I just forgot it. And my mind's going. But yeah, when you cover the Olympics, like, it's not just like, oh, the bus pulls up, you get out, and the event starts like 20 minutes later, right? Like what's it take to cover the alpine events? It's not just wake up and go walk out there and you're there.
Right. So, like this most recent Olympics, I've done 7 Olympic Games, and this most recent one in China, we base photographers in zones, and especially we had to do this with China because of all the restrictions around COVID and travel, and so like there was clusters of, types of events. So like I was in the Alpine cluster, which is where like you had the both the technical and the downhill skiing, and then the sliding center, which is like a bobsleigh, luge, and skeleton. And for Alpine, most of those races kick off at 10:30 or 11 in the morning, but you really need to be at the venue probably by no later than 8 o'clock. And if you're on the mountain, like we had a ski photographer who's an Alpine specialist, and so like he skis to position, so like he had to be at the venue by 6:30 to be able to get on the lift to be able to ski to position. So when you back that out, that's leaving the hotel at 4:30 or 5 in the morning every day. And then you're, for Alpine, you're on the, and if you're lucky and the weather's good, the event kicks off at 10:30 or 11. And if it's one of the early day ski events, you might have 80 some skiers from around the world. And so, you've got skiers coming down the mountain till 3 o'clock. And that's if there's no weather delays. So, it's challenging. I mean, the guys that are on, like, that are on the mountain, like, it's really cold. Like the China was really, really cold, and like you're stuck in position. You've skied to position, and you're on crampons, and you're there till the event is over. I was covering stuff in the lower part of the mountain where you're hiking up with crampons, but at least there you can move around. If you get cold, you can hike up and down and move around a little bit on the side and try and warm up. But yeah, it's a lot of really long physical days of carrying gear and then prepping for trying to figure out where you can be, where you can see the course. And especially with alpine skiing, you can't cover every gate. You can't see everything on the course. And so there's gonna be days where you're just not going to get it. Like one of the days that Michaela Schifrin got skied off, like nobody got it except for Bob Bucati from AP. It was just because where people chose, like, you pick the gates that you want to shoot. But they might ski, 40 pairs of gates down the course, and you can only realistically see 3 or 4 of those.
And then so you get home.
It's a challenge.
Yeah.
You get home from the Olympics, and everyone's like, "So, did you have fun?" You're like, I'm tired and I'm cold and I want to sleep for 2 weeks. But
it's like a month long. I mean, at least the summer it's a month long endeavor, because you can't just show up the day before. Again, you got to show up a week ahead, get your credentials, get acclimated to the bus routes or the transportation. But what I was going to say was that what is a little bit, I count it as a plus, is by USA Today having those subscription to all those other services, then that they're going to have that covered. I'm going to go where they're not. And that's, sometimes you have to. There's just certain places where the action's going to happen, like at gymnastics, and they only allow you certain spots. You can't just go anywhere you want to on that hill. It has to be pre-approved ahead of time. And but knowing that the other people are there, then maybe you can try that different angle, or the light. The light's going to hit the mountain just differently, or things like that. But it's fun. All I remember is the one time I got to go. Whenever I got a little bit down, I just say, I'm at the Olympics.
Yeah.
So yeah, but you've been to 7. It's like, oh yes, it's a Tuesday for me.
Well, no, but it's still like it's an immense amount of prep for each one, and like every time you come back, you always are sort of second guessing, like, what could I have done better, and you chalk that up to the next time you go, and for your preparation, and it's the variety of it too. Like both the summer and the Winter Olympics, I enjoy, because you end up covering a lot of sports that are sort of outside the mainstream, the mainstream ball and stick sports in the U.S. And when I started out, like I still love covering a lot of sports. Is one of the things I was best at. But it was, the great thing about the Olympics is you get to experience different types of sports, and you meet photographers from around the world, and you can pick their brain on, like the sliding events, like that, like I was at sliding this year, and like there were a couple German photographers that I've known from previous games, and like they cover a lot of sliding because the Germans are really good at sliding,
right?
And like they just dominated it, and so like they really know how to cover that sport and like what to look for, and they can give you tips on like, okay, this pair is really good, and they sort of react this way, and so that's part of what's about sports is you're looking for both action and also reaction, and sort of like, well, the image you're showing here is like being able to put sport in a sense of place, and to be able to show both beauty and show topography, or like the neat thing about sliding is it's usually like a very interesting architecturally designed course. But what was really interesting about this, it was like right down the mountain from the Alpine event. So like you can see that that the Alpine peak there is the Alpine course, and then you're just I spent like a day beforehand trying to scope like, well, where could I go to see both the sliding venue and the Alpine course, and then trying to figure out when does the light match, because like the course, the ice is lit, but when does that match what the ambient light outside is? And that was really only about a 10-minute window when you could make this picture and have it where your exposure matches for both light sources. And unfortunately, like this is one of the things that you're sort of the limitations you have at the Olympics. Like they don't always, the photo managers are normally really good and help you, but like they can't help with the schedule because like that's all driven by television. And so this was a practice run. It would have been great if this was competition. But you sort of take your wins where you can get them.
Yeah, that's crazy. No, a normal person would not be thinking that many thoughts or steps goes into one of those photos, but I love it. Outside of the Olympics, I just have a question. Right. Sorry, or you still want to talk about the Olympics?
No, there's so many, we could talk all day about just the sports coverage you do. That's kind of a fun thing. It's just, it is fun. But how do you see like your experience from, like when we ask everybody, like when you were in high school or even just starting your college career, did you see yourself going to the Olympics and Super Bowl and the Academy Awards?
That was probably more in college I maybe saw that. Because like in high school, I always thought I was going to be an engineer. And I just sort of was dabbling in photography at the time. Like I had an art teacher that got me into photography, and then just started shooting sports for the Ames Tribune my senior year in high school, and then said, oh, this is actually kind of interesting. And then you get into college, and it was more about then figuring out like, well, what does that mean to not just be a photographer, but to be a photojournalist? Like, what does it mean to tell stories, even within sports? Like, how are you going to make images that actually tell a story? And then, that's a process. And, it was also a process for me to realize that as much as I was interested in engineering, I wasn't gonna spend enough time studying engineering to make that academically. So it was definitely an inflection point, probably about the time you hired me, Rodney. The School of Engineering said, you could take a semester or two off and get work to get your grades up, or you consider switching majors. So I switched to school liberal arts and got a journalism degree and poli-sci degree. But
yeah, it was great back at that time when
I think it's a process of discovery on that. Sorry, I was talking over you.
No, you're fine. I forgot we got the delay, but that's fine. I always remember the craft. I feel lucky, but I'm glad we don't do it anymore to have do film and that have that whole logistics. And I was talking to Bob Nandel, and he was a University of Iowa grad from 1963 before he started at the Register. And they would talk about, you have to know chemistry, a little bit of chemistry, a little bit about light, but just a lot about just getting the film done. Like 90% of the whole process was being able to expose properly so you could see faces and then eventually see colors with lights and stuff. And nowadays it is more about the art, and that's why I think you can have more photographers who can shoot, but now it kind of elevates the art of it more, and it's just such like going from covering a football game where it takes 3 people to get 3 color images out, and it takes them 2 days because they got to set the film line up and check the chemistry ahead of time, and then you've got 10 members, and you're developing like 50 rolls of film, but as a stringer, you were getting like $10 a roll, which was a great thing. But now, I mean, you can literally call somebody up an hour before the game, hey, can you run and shoot that game, or, get a stringer here? And
right.
It's just changed. The logistics have changed, but they're still there. They're still there.
No, they definitely are. I mean, and you'd mentioned it earlier, like I still have that UPI drum that was bouncing around Iowa City because I sort of took over from whoever was doing it before. Yep. And did that for a year or two before John Gapps at AP had me freelancing for him, and that was when UPI was going through their like probably 5th bankruptcy. Yeah. And they didn't pay me, so I kept the transmitter. But I'm like you. I'm just old enough to have done a couple of years of when you were on the road, like you had to develop your film on the road in a hotel bathroom and make prints and get it on a drum, and that a color project would take you a half hour to get out, and for one picture. And I think the lessons, like the logistical lessons of going through that and then making that transition to digital, like that really helps in terms of being able to solve problems, because if you had any point of failure in the film days along that line, like you weren't getting a picture out at all. And so it was both a craft and an artistic endeavor.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, how were you able to, knowing that that's where you started and this is where things are going and it's continuously changing, how are you able to pivot and to evolve and to change and to just like move with, go along with it? Because it's just moving so fast.
It is. I mean, and the pace of change is moving very, very quickly. I mean, I think part of it is you've just always got to keep your eyes and ears open and be open to new ideas and see, like, is there a new way to do things, and think about, like, how could I use whatever new tool or platform that's coming along? How can I use that to help elevate storytelling? I mean, I knew, like, even when I was at the DI, I knew I had an interest in editing. But I didn't want to become an editor right then. I wanted to be able to spend time shooting, and I still like to spend time shooting. Probably not as much as I want, but I knew, probably from kind of my engineering background, that I did like the editing aspect in terms of being able to, the logistics and planning, and being able to sort of design your success, and so that I think served me well for, after Iowa City, did internships at the Cleveland Plain Dealer and LA Times, and then ended up at the Dallas Morning News, and spent 5 years, for about half my time there. The first 5 years I was covering news and sports around the country, and on the road a lot, and then sort of transitioned into editing. Then we had a huge staff. We had one of the largest staffs in the country at the time, and we had a lot of great mentors there that helped me. I was interested in editing, but you didn't really know how to do that and what that really meant. And so, had a lot of great mentors there, John Davidson and Leslie White and, William Snyder and Ken Geiger, that just really pushed me into that. And then, last couple of years was editing on the sports and business desk, and then came to USA Today as an editor.
I was going to touch on a little bit, just briefly, about your wife. I mean, it helps to have a spouse or a family that knows the job and stuff, but, your wife has a little bit of an idea how sports are covered. Could you explain what she does?
Sure. So, no, I was very fortunate. That was another one of the great benefits of working at the Iowa City Press-Citizen. My wife, Roxana, was an intern at the Press-Citizen while I was on staff, and she asked me out there, and nice. That was, I'm not going to tell you how many years ago, but more than 25 years ago. but she's now the vice president of an executive editor for sports for USA Today Network.
Wow.
So she handles all kind of like a lot of the big logistics for major events and planning, and works a lot with our network and staff development. And so, yeah, it's Rodney, I mean, you know this because, Tina has that sort of similar background and understands sort of the demands as a journalist in terms of on our time and the sort of the unpredictable nature of it's not a 9-to-5 job. And so obviously that's been a huge support that, we kind of both have and understand that we do get pulled at odd hours, and there's kind of strange demands compared to, other jobs. So that helps a lot.
I was just going to ask, do the two of you ever sleep? I'm not hearing much time for sleep in any of this.
I do. I've made a point now. I think when I was younger, I would sort of made it a point of pride of not, just kind of working to exhaustion. But, now I'm more purposeful about when I met that out. But it is, there's a lot of things about this job that are really all consuming. And sometimes you just have to be available and willing to put, your foot on the gas, to go because the story demands it. But it's also, I think it's important sort of for balance and mental health to, take breaks too.
Definitely.
Do you still have that Suburban, from the 70s? What is it, 1976 Suburban or something?
It's from the early 90s. I've got a big old Suburban that it looks like an old ex Secret Service Suburban.
Those things were built to
last.
Got that off of a guy here in D.C. and it was one owner, but yeah, it's good for towing the boat.
That is awesome. So we talked a little bit about the Olympics and the inauguration and things that you have to prepare for. But what happens when something just pops up and it's in the middle of Ohio or somewhere a little more remote? I know you said you have teams all over. Kind of what's that process like?
So it depends. I mean, USA Today, what we call USA Today Network, is really the conglomeration of all of our properties across the country. And Gannett owns 200 plus, newsrooms around the country. And, it's funny you mentioned Ohio because that's probably one of the states where we have the highest density of properties. Crap. So if something happened in central Ohio, I'd be on the phone with the Columbus Dispatch because it's one of our properties. Just like if something happened near Des Moines, we'd be calling the Register as kind of first point of contact. But there's definitely aspects of, you get a story that you're working on and you need to find a photographer in Gillette, Wyoming. Well, that's not where we have properties, and so sometimes it's building that network of freelance photographers and people that around the country, and so you've got both your mental map, and then we actually have now with more modern tools, actual kind of Google Maps with pins of all of our staff and freelancers, and so we can see who's actually close and who has sort of the skill set that matches that to be able to put them out on the road to cover that event.
Are you the one on the phone though, making the phone call and landing all that up?
It depends on the story. Most of the time it's, I've got several editors that work with me that are, doing that. But yeah, at any given time, yeah, sometimes. Ugh. But it's a team. We have a pretty good sized team here that works on that.
Well, I was going to ask, I think I was a beneficiary of one of your, I don't know if you were the impetus for the program, but it was the drone program that they started up. And it wasn't just let's buy a couple of Mavics. You worked with the FAA directly with other organizations, but to help shape how media use drones.
Right. So that's a good example. I mean, you asked the question earlier about, sort of how do you pivot and, sort of prepare for what's next. And that was a kind of perfect example of, we had a few instances where, newsrooms were asking about that, and I was getting questions within our newsroom. And I didn't know the answer to that. And this was sort of before the FAA was regulating the use of drones for news gathering. And so I went to our chief legal officer, who's, we're really fortunate. We've got a great legal team, and, we can pop in and ask questions, and they're very, they're huge First Amendment defenders. But I went to Barbara Wall and I said, hey, I got a question about this. Like, this is cropping up, and this was probably 2014, 2015. And I said, this would be a great tool for us, but like, how do we do it? And what's the legal framework? And she didn't know either. So she said, just, start doing the research, figure out how we would do this for the company. It's like, okay. And so, a year or two later, we had stood up a program, and, we trained, more than 60 pilots at 20 newsrooms around the country on like, not only how do we use, drones to tell stories from the air, but like also how to do it ethically and how to do it within sort of the alignment of the FAA rules. And when we were standing up our program was basically the same time the FAA was working through what their process was going to be. It kind of went from, it was a Wild West, there was no regulation, to they shut everything down and nobody could use them legally. And then they've sort of backed off into sort of a regulatory space. And we've worked with them a lot on, what does that mean for, specifically news companies around the First Amendment coverage. And, that might be different than commercial usage for, like, say, real commercial real estate, or like that, solar, drones are used a lot for like solar panel inspection, or, radio tower inspection. So it's a really evolving industry. And so we've been able to work with the FAA on, to help influence about what we need from the, news space.
Well, and I just like how you had such a close connection with the FAA. Like when we, you sent teams around to cover the Hurricane Irma, and we were down in the Keys, and I luckily was on one of these teams, and it was like, we need to get to that airport, but it's basically guarded by, 10, 25-year-olds with M16s and a tent. Basically, they're in charge of the airport right now. And then you were able to make a call with FAA and get us clearance within a half hour, because you had that direct, and not going through a web connection, and submitting writing.
Call the FAA.
Just call them up and.
Well, but I mean, I think it was indicative about that we really approached it professionally over the course of a year or two, and would work with them on things. And so, like, when we do reach out now, like, we're not one of the sort of more frequent users of drones, like a lot of the like local television stations use them a lot more than we do. But they know our operation. They know that that we're professional, and the sort of level of training that we put our folks through internally. And so that goes a long way when we have a natural disaster and say, hey, you've got a TFR up, we want to be able to fly. You can send in a request, and they know who we are, and they'll I can get a response back a lot of times within 15 minutes. So that's great. What didn't always used to be like that, but it's been a great experience.
Well, I just want to, before we wrap up, just touch on briefly there's this Eddie Adams workshop that started, I don't know what they're up to. Is it 30 or 40 years? Are they getting up there? It was started in like 87,
no,
88.
Yeah. I think we're on 34.
34.
No, this is 35. This is 35.
Okay. And I'm just going to say, I went to the first one with Mark Hirsch. Yeah. Mark Hirsch from Dubuque. And what they did, they picked two people from every state, and Warren Taylor at the Register said, hey, you should sign up for this. I'll write you a little letter. And it was just like, okay, we show up, and it's like, it's free. And got on a plane and met at a bus station in New York, and they took us up to this barn that wasn't even finished. They didn't have heat.
Oh, wow.
And all of a sudden you're like, there's Douglas Kirkland, the famous fashion photographer. Oh, there's, what's his name from Miami? Bill Frakes. There's Rich Clarkson. There's Eddie Adams himself, a Pulitzer Prize, famous photo of the Saigon chief, shooting the guy. Anyway, so what they did, they brought in people, and they wanted to give back to the community of photographers, or help shape. So it was like students and anybody with just 2 years experience. And you could go to this free seminar, and it was amazing. But now, Andy, you get to present there and a coach, and what's that like?
Is it still in the barn?
Yeah, no. The last 5-6 years, I've been a editor and coach there, and I've presented there. I was a student the ninth year of it, and it's a really transformative experience for a lot of students. it's developed now that, so, like, I think, Rodney, when you were there, you said, basically that it took 2 students from each state. Now we take 50 students from the US and 50 internationally.
Oh, wow.
And it's a mix of people that are students that are still in school and people with like less than 3 or less than 4 years professional experience. And so, it's the format is very much the same as when you went. There's 10 teams of 10. We each assign our students sort of a theme that they're working on for the weekend. It might be agriculture, it might be hope, or, some of them may be more specific about, like, that's maybe easier to visualize, and some of them may be more things that you have to think about in terms of, like, like hope or color, or, and so those teams go out in the field, and there's a producer assigned to each team, and they've done some legwork on preliminary story ideas, and then the students are assigned that, and this takes place over the course of 4 days at Eddie Adams Farm. And it's a really amazing experience for students. And, it pushes them a lot, and it pushes them in areas that maybe they haven't always worked in. So, like, we have folks who come in who are really like creative portraitists or fashion photographers, and we're pushing them in sort of a photojournalistic way, or, or you may be getting people that are really into like long-term storytelling, and we're pushing them to cover a sports story. And so, but it's really compressed. There's not a lot of sleep, and so we're pushing the students, and we as faculty learn a lot from them as well. But it's a great intro to, like, as Rodney said, like, there's a lot of sort of titans of industry that are there that students can meet and establish connections, and for those in my position, it's a great way to see, the emerging talent, and to discover people that, may be good for, either our direct newsroom, or if, like in my case, that, like, there have been several people every year that I direct into other Gannett newsrooms, when job openings come open. So it's a great opportunity for students and for faculty.
Yeah, what a great experience.
Yeah. My favorite part was the 11:30 club, they called it. Maybe it was basically you spent all day, well, not all day shooting. You'd shoot and then come back and have supper, but they had these, like, you'd meet at the bar at 11:30, and then, like, at 1:00 in the morning, all of a sudden Gregory Heisler is showing his whole tray of before afters. So he was huge back in the 90s, and he's an amazing portraitist, but he would show these, like, here's what it looked like before, years after, and he just went, for like an hour and a half, like, just mesmerized and not sleeping, and then you have to get up at 6. And
there's no sleep. There's no sleep in this podcast, none.
But yeah, it was amazing, and so yeah, it's usually how we wrap these up. And I hate to, because I could talk to you all day about this, because I have, especially about drones. I think I was the one who was calling you for 2 years, like, hey, can we get this? Can we do this? Can we do this? Oh, wait.
You were one of the people that were calling.
It's coming. We usually ask somebody for a piece of advice. Then, it could be about life, love, profession.
Life, love, profession. I love that. Life, love, profession.
Sure.
Anything.
Well, I'd say that, I'd say you've got to be, sort of true to your passions and interests, but also know that, like, your passions and interests are probably going to take you in places that you didn't envision early in your career. And, that you have to be open to sort of that change, and open to opportunities that are going to present themselves, and, be prepared to push yourself sometimes into areas that might be a little uncomfortable, but might open up a lot of opportunities for growth, or, sort of personal discovery. And, like, I think the people that I've seen, especially in the journalism profession, that have been able to do it for over the long haul, are the ones that are really creative and are sort of relentlessly curious, and they want to discover new things, and, like, they aren't necessarily set in, like, the way that they did things in 1990. They might be figuring out new ways of storytelling, or figuring out new tools, and, like, how can they keep growing. And I think that's sort of like in any creative field. I think, you're fighting repetition, because you do something in a creative field, and you get good at it, and you get rewarded or lauded for being good at it, but it's also can become repetitive because you've already sort of mastered that in a sense. And so you got to be constantly looking for what's the next thing that you can learn to become, to challenge yourself.
I love that. That's great advice.
No, that
was really good. That was good. It's you always have to be evolving. You can teach old dog new tricks. You should never sleep if you want to be successful. I'm just kidding. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, we called it Dick Thien, the editor at the Press Citizen, called it the thrill of monotony. That was kind of, because you knew you were going to cover the same thing, especially in a small town, over and over, and it was just that trying to find a different angle. And then, there's always next year. That's what we always said in newspapers too. Is like, we didn't quite get it right. There's always tomorrow. But we again, the first blush of history. That's what you feel. It's a calling. I think it is, because there's more lucrative things you could be doing in photography than a news photographer. But if you stick with it, there's opportunities. And Andy's a great example
of that. Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you for taking time. I know you're a really busy guy, but thanks for taking time to chat with us. Where can we find you? I want people to be able to go out and find you and look you up and see all the cool things you're doing.
Yeah, thanks for having me here to chat. It's been great to catch up and talk. And probably the best way, and I'm not going to direct people to my website because I'm embarrassed to say that hasn't been updated in more than 10 years. But Instagram's probably where I post my work most regularly. It's just AP Scott USAT on Instagram is where you can find my work.
Amazing. All right. Well, thank you so much, Andy. We will talk to you later.